Okay. Chapter 12, Rocky Ridge Farm. Our idea of an idle home built by men and women together, whereas at the Wilders Rocky Ridge Farm was developed through Laura and Manley working together to transform their Ozarks into the fruit dairy. And property farm, just as they did, have been partners to wheat farmers in South Dakota. The Wilders to turn it into very successful farm in Missouri. Okay, because Manley was so weakened by his crippled feet, he needed Laura's quickness and energy. She became Manley's best helper. For the first winter on Rocky Ridge, Laura and Manley were to clear the brush and the timber from their land. Some of the fallen trees were saved to use fences, rails, and for building a long barn and a hen house. Laura loved working in the winter woods, where the gray tree trunks stretched up to the sky, and the ground was frosty, and he had underfoot. A two-man cross-cut saw he was using, feeling the trees. Laura pulled one end of the saw, and Manley pulled the other, and a raspy sound filled in the woods. While Laura and Manley worked in the woods, Rose studied in the red brick school in town. Often she walked up the path to the cabin. After school, she could hear the ringing of her father's axe from the woods. He cut wagon loads of wood and hauled them into the man's field to sell for 75 cents. A load that money helped to buy groceries and kerosene. During the first months under Rocky Ridge, along for the money from eggs were sold by spring of 1895. 20 acres of land were cleared. Time to plant the apple orchard and the first crops. During the spring planting time, Laura, Manley, and Rose worked together to sow seeds for the cornfield. At the head of the ravine, Rose was only 8, but she helped Laura plant the garden. Seeds and gathered eggs. The hens laid in grasses near the cabin. When the huckleberries and blackberries ripened in the woods, Rose picked them for pies or walked into the town to sell them for 10 cents a gallon. At school, Rose Wilder was quickly become known as the smartest pupil in her class. She could spell her way to the head of the line in the Friday spelling contests, and she loved to read. From the library shelves at school, she brought books home to read aloud by the firelight. While Manley even bowed a bowl of popcorn, and Rose worked her arithmetic sums by the light of the kerosene lamp. Laura read to them all. During those evenings, the fire they read was The Laverstocking Tales, Five Little Peppers and How They Grew, Pride and Prejudice, Ben-Hur, The House of Seven Gables, and Martin Chuzzlewit. They all like the suspense of reading serial stories spread in newspapers. Each week a new chapter would appear, and each week at the chapter would end in. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm not in the picture of them. Would appear each week at the chapter would abruptly leaving the Wilders eager to know what will happen next. Before they have left South Dakota, the Naismith News and Letter had started printing a story called The Radnock Sage. Rose enjoyed the tale so much that Grandma Ingalls sent each weekly installment on the Wilders in Missouri. After it had been read aloud to Mary one a week, Grandma Ingalls' letter did not come, and Rose wrote immediately asking for the missing acknowledgement. Grace went from house to house on the first street until until she found another copy and mailed it to her eager niece. On Sundays, after the busy week of work and school, the Wilders drove to the town in buggy to attend services of Mansfield Methodist Church. Sometimes they spent the rest of the day at the coulees, or the coulees come out to Rocky Ridge for the afternoon. As the weather was good, Laura liked to serve picnics, dinners in the ravine, while the parents rested along the shady ledges. Rose, Paul, and George waited in the creek, ran uptown the steep hills, or used the tough grapevines. As tweens, Laura and Rose enjoyed showing company how they tamed wild birds and squirrels to eat from their hands. Manly and Laura still loved horseback riding, and together they rode over the hills of Rocky Ridge or along leaf-shaded roads nearby. They were determined that Rose should learn to ride, so they bought her a fat, stubborn little donkey to start with, naming Spunkadike. Rose quickly grew up to hate her pet, especially when she was expected to ride him. The mile to school and back, each morning Rose carried her dinner pail and books. Mountains Spunkadike, but the time that she reached the gate at the bottom of the hill, the determined donkey would balk. He slumped forward, letting Rose and her books and her dinner tumble to the ground. Rose was usually forced to lead Spunkadike to school, where she tied him up until only to listen to a bracing squealing while she studied in the quiet classroom. He was one of the most hated, if not the most hated memories. Rose later said, laughing when she recalled Spunkadike and her trips back and forth to school with him. By the second summer on Rocky Ridge Farm, the Wilders were cheerfully proceeding. They were able to meet the payments of their land and pay 8% interest. Okay. 8% interest rates. They bought 6 more acres for $18. Now they have a cow and a pig and more grazing land was needed. Rose and Laura chirped good about butter, which sold in town for 10 cents a pound. There was extra vegetables to sell to townspeople who had no gardens. We thought we were rich, Laura said of the second year on the farm. The stubborn stone arsenic soul of Rocky Ridge farm started to produce for the Wilders. Manly and Laura arrived to study about the orchid business, and their 20 acres of apple trees grew well. They added peaches and pear trees to the orchard, and then planted strawberries, raspberries between the tree rows. They built in a neighbor, planted grapes on the clear land. Manly planted fields of oats and corn and wheat. When he walked over the farm and saw crops growing smooth green and meadows and pastures, he said, I can hardly bring my mind back to the rough, rocky, ugly, rushy place. We called it Rocky Ridge Farm, although they both have an interest in every aspect of farming that was on Rocky Ridge. Manly and Laura also decided to each let a specialty. Laura chose the poultry. She was always proud that selling her chickens and eggs during the first winter of the farm had helped buy needed food and supplies from the town. Manly decided that would handle the cows. He said that Rocky Ridge was a natural dairy farm, with much good clearing, spring water available, and grazing grass growing. Where the trees were clear, he and Laura bought another 40 acres to add to the farm. There was plenty of land for a herd of cattle while they were expanding the farm. Wilders also had enlarged the cabin in the edge of the ravine After their first winter in a tiny log house, Manly added a new frame with real windows and a door. And in spring of 1896 in Laura, Laura selected a new building site. A few steps from the cabin, but still in the raven's edge. The new frame from one of the old cabin around the room on the big logs to the new site, leaving the cabin to be used as a barn. Then Manly built a new room and joined the two rooms together with a sleeping loft above for Rose that was beginning of a new house in Rocky Ridge Farm. Once the Wilders became acquainted with their neighbors, there were countries, corn husking parties, and warlocks, and barn dances and quality bees to attend. In the summer, there were outdoor singings and playing parties to enjoy. We're a lot dancing. There's always a little music in my feet. She is playing at parties when the fiddlers and banjo players turn up by the sweet Bessie from Hike or Taramunde. Or there will be a hot time in the old town tonight. Laura was ready for the dance. The food at the Orzak's gathering Wilders attended during those early years were blooming. Bountiful. Long boards covered with tablecloths held so many baskets and bowls and platters that no space remained uncovered. Laura's own specialty for partner parties were her gingerbread, made from an old recipe. She learned from Ma whenever there was a dinner or the Methodist church ladies were planning a social. Laura was asked to bring a pan of spicy gingerbread. At home, Laura saved the gingerbread for a special occasion. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Rose, December's birthday. Or her own birthday, Manly's both of which were in February. Rose was ambitious to make the gingerbread recipe, and she never forgot her first experience baking. It was Manly's birthday, and he and Laura were going for the day. Rose had been given permission to bake the birthday gingerbread, even though as she remembered it, my mother had often me to watch the bread baking, and every time to do it, I was lost in a book until she rushed into it. And my mother had left me to watch the bread baking, and every time she did, I was lost in the book until she rushed into the full smokehouse. It snatched cinders of loaves out of the oven. But Rose was proud that her mother, whom she called Mama Beth, trusted her with the gingerbread. She was determined to be especially careful baking for her first gingerbread. I'm so excited, of course, and nervous, but I made the gingerbread carefully, measuring everything and watching and baking. The gingerbread baked perfectly, and I had just taken it out of the oven. When the minister came to call, all the duties hostess were mine, unexpectedly. I felt important and welcome to the minister, seated him in the front room, spoke politely about the weather and such as the excuse for a minute. In return, with napkins, glasses of water, 3 pieces of hot gingerbread, proudly served. The minister was surprised and pleased. He looked slightly startled at first, but at a piece what he declined. A second and soon left. I ate none of myself, saving it the special supper that evening. I would not have cut it for anyone, but such a caller at the minister after supper. My father, my mother, and I each took a piece of that beautiful soft red brown gingerbread. As tempting as my mother had baked, but it burned its lid to blisters. Our Tons and I had used hot cayenne pepper by mistake instead of ginger. The Methodist minister may have been an exception for the visitors who came to Rocky Ridge with the Waters home and memories of tasty food and interesting talk of the site of Parsons Farm being covered out of the Ozarks Islands. Good health, good homes, a good living, and good times, and a good neighbor. Laura said as she fought other life on Rocky Ridge. Ridge fought during the first year in the Ozarks. What more can anyone want? She wondered. Laura, at age 70, in 1947, she looked at On the Banks of Palm Creek were published. Laura and Almanzo would bend the bulldog at home, Rocky Ridge, in the 1940s. Okay, and here's a picture of those two. Laura studied books in Springfield, Missouri in 1952. She was 85. Laura at home on Rocky Ridge is one of her favorite velvet dresses. She was 87 when this photo was taken in 1954. Laura with her friend and driver Jim Hurley and her new 1954 Oldsmobile. I did not even know that they had a car. Paul's fiddle now on display as Laura's Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum in Milledgeville. Okay. Pictures again. Whew, this is a lot of pictures. Laura's lap desk made by Almanzo and brought from Dave Smith to Milledgeville. In 1894, the oval glass bread plate that survived the fire in the Wilder Street Claim House in Dave Smith. Almanzo gave the striking clock to Laura for a Christmas surprise. In 1886, for the rest of his life, he wanted the clock just before bedtime. It was still ticking in the Wilders' home on Rocky Ridge Farm. The Ingalls Family Bible, now on display at Laura's Ingalls Wilder's Home Museum in Milledgeville. Okay, here's pictures again. There might be more. Yep, we're almost done with the pictures. The rocky house that Rose had built for Almanzo. The rock house that Rose had built for Almanzo and Laura in 1928. Okay. I'm going to pause the video.